On my daughter's wedding day, I handed her an envelope with a gift. I thought she would smile, maybe hug me, maybe say thank you. Instead, she lifted her glass and said she had always wished for a different father. Then she wrapped her arms around her father-in-law while I stood there, feeling like a stranger. I couldn't stay. I left the hall quietly, heart heavy, but when she later opened the envelope I gave her, the whole wedding turned into a nightmare. To understand how things reached that point, you have to go back. $45,000. That was the number my daughter, Letitia, spoke one evening in her Bloomfield Hills townhouse. Her voice was sharp and clear, slicing through the silence like a knife. I stood awkwardly in her perfect living room. Everything looked polished and expensive. White furniture, a shiny glass coffee table, chrome light fixtures, huge windows showing lawns so perfectly cut they probably cost more each month than I earned from my pension. I clutched my old cap in both hands, feeling like a dirty smudge in the middle of her spotless world. I had come with hope in my heart. I wanted to talk to her about her wedding. I wanted to help in some way. Maybe I couldn't do much, but I thought she would still value my effort. "Sweetheart," I began, but she was already busy. She spread glossy wedding magazines across the table. Each one was thick and heavy, full of castles, ballrooms, and gowns that cost more than a car. "Look at this place, Dad," she said, pointing at a picture of a mansion with tall columns and chandeliers. "This is where successful people get married. This is where my friends are getting married." Her excitement filled the room. My throat went dry. I had polished my old work boots before coming, put on the least faded shirt I owned, even rehearsed what I'd say in the car on the way over. My plan was simple. Offer a few $1,000s, promise to help set up tables or chairs, maybe cook food for the guests. I thought that would be enough. But then she said it again. $45,000. "The flowers alone are $8,000, she continued, flipping through pages quickly. "The photographer is $5. The dress I want is $3,500, but it's perfect. You should see it." I took out my phone, fumbling with the calculator. My entire savings, every penny I'd scraped together from 40 years at the Ford plant, was just $12,000. That was all I had. "I have $12,000 in savings," I said softly. "That's everything. But maybe I could try for a small loan." Her smile disappeared. Her face hardened. Her voice rose. $12,000. That's it. Other fathers take out loans, sell cars, even mortgage their houses. What are you willing to do for your own daughter? The words stung like blows. I wanted to remind her of everything I had already done. After her mother, Elena, died, it was me who raised her alone. I worked double shifts so she would have new clothes for school. I went without things so she could go to college. I gave her my whole life so she could become the successful marketing professional she was today. I could try for a loan, I repeated helplessly. But $45,000. Maybe we could find something more affordable. I glanced around her expensive townhouse. "You're doing well. Maybe we don't need to go that big." "More affordable," she snapped. She threw the magazine down so hard it scattered others across the floor. "Cheap, you mean? Do you know what Marcus's father is paying for his sister's wedding? $60,000. And that's considered modest in their family. Marcus, her fiancé, came from money. His father owned half the restaurants in downtown Detroit. "I'm 35, Dad," Letitia said, her eyes blazing. "This is my one chance to have the wedding I deserve. My friends' fathers would do anything for their daughters. They would move heaven and earth. But you..." She paused, looking me up and down, from my worn jacket to my nervous, calloused hands. "You're just a failure." The word failure hung in the air like smoke from a burning house, refusing to fade. All my friends will have perfect weddings, Letitia said, her voice sharp, almost trembling with anger. And I'll have to settle for some cheap backyard barbecue because my father can't give me what every other parent manages. Do you know how embarrassing that is? I opened my mouth to answer, to tell her about the plant closing early, about the years of medical bills from Elena's cancer, about the nights I worked until my body ached just to keep food on the table. I wanted to tell her that I had done my best with the life I was given. But nothing came out. My throat was locked. You've had 35 years to figure out how to be successful, she continued, her eyes blazing. And this is all you have to show for it? $12,000. Her words cut deeper than anything I had ever heard. She walked to the door, her high heels clicking across the hardwood floor that probably cost more than my old pickup truck. Just leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing in my chest like a hammer. I stood frozen in her driveway, holding my keys, staring at my beat-up Ford. Around me were her neighbors' shiny cars, BMWs, Audis, and Mercedes. My old truck looked like it didn't belong there, like I didn't belong there. The drive home felt heavy. The steering wheel seemed harder to hold, the road darker than usual. When I pulled into my own driveway, the truck engine clicked and ticked as it cooled, but I couldn't bring myself to get out. Through the windshield, I looked at my house. A small ranch built in the 1960s, with paint that needed freshening and gutters that sagged on the east side. Compared to Letitia's townhouse, it looked tired, almost ashamed. When I finally went inside, the silence swallowed me whole. I turned on the lamp by Elena's old reading chair, the chair I had never moved since she passed. She used to sit there at night, talking about Letitia's future, planning for college, for careers, for a brighter life than ours. I glanced at the photos on the mantel. Letitia at her high school graduation, smiling in her cap and gown. Letitia at her college ceremony, shaking hands and holding her diploma. Family dinners when Elena was still alive, laughter frozen forever in pictures. In every photo I looked proud. Maybe I had been fooling myself all those years. Elena, what would you do? I whispered into the empty room. Our girl deserves happiness. Maybe I really am a failure if I can't give her what she wants. 40 years at the plant, and all I had to show for it was $12,000 in savings, and a daughter who had called me a failure to my face. I sat down at the kitchen table, where I always kept bills stacked in careful piles. The mortgage booklet showed I had 18 payments left. Just a year and a half until I owned the house free and clear. My pension statement lay beside it. $1,800 a month. Social Security added another $800. Not much, but enough to cover the basics. I should have felt relief knowing I had survived this long, but instead I felt shame. Maybe I could still do something. Maybe I could still be the father she wanted. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank's 24-hour loan line. The automated voice guided me through numbers and menus until finally a woman answered. This is Jennifer. How can I help you tonight? I swallowed hard. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Yes, I'm interested in a personal loan. $45,000. Of course, sir, she said. I'll need to transfer you to a representative who can discuss your options. May I have your name and social security number? As I gave her the information, my mind wandered to Elena. She had always been the cautious one, the planner. She hated risk. But she was also the one who once told me, love sometimes means taking chances that scare you. The representative explained I would need an appointment, paperwork, proof of income. The words blurred together in my ear, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that there was still a chance. Maybe I couldn't be rich like Marcus's father. Maybe I couldn't erase all the years of struggle and sacrifice. But maybe, just maybe, I could still prove to my daughter that I was the father she needed. She called me a failure. Maybe she was right. But then I thought, failures don't love their daughters enough to risk everything. Failures don't spend their lives working double shifts, missing holidays, putting dreams aside just so their children can have a better chance. I walked into the kitchen and opened the cupboard. There it was, Elena's favorite tea, still sitting on the shelf 3 years after she passed. I pulled the box down and held it close, breathing in the faint, familiar scent. It brought her voice back to me as clearly as if she were standing there. Dwayne, that girl is our greatest achievement. Whatever it takes to see her happy. Tears filled my eyes. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe this was my chance to prove myself one more time. Tomorrow I would go to the bank. Tonight I would plan everything. I would surprise Letitia with the full amount. My savings plus whatever loan I could get. Then she would see. Then she would know her old man wasn't finished yet. The alarm clock rang at 6:30 the next morning, but I had been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, running through numbers in my head. By 10 a.m., I was standing in front of Chase Bank on Woodward Avenue. The building towered above me, glass and steel rising into gray Detroit skies. Security cameras followed every move. Everything about the place screamed importance. This was where serious people made serious financial decisions. I smoothed down my best button-down shirt, the same one I wore to Letitia's college graduation. I clutched the folder under my arm. Pension statements, Social Security papers, 40 years of work history at the Ford plant. My heart pounded, but in my memory, I heard Elena whisper, "Stand tall, Dwayne. You're as good as anyone." The lobby bustled with people. Young professionals in sharp suits spoke confidently about investments and portfolios, moving through the line as if they had been born to belong here. I felt small, out of place, but I stayed. When it was my turn, a woman at a desk gestured to me. Her nameplate read, Sandra Williams, Personal Banking. She was about Letitia's age, maybe a little older. Her smile was polite but professional. "Mr. Gomez? Please have a seat." I sat down carefully, my folder trembling slightly in my hands. "I understand you're interested in a personal loan?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, forcing my voice steady. $45,000. It's for my daughter's wedding. Sandra began typing on her keyboard, the rapid clicks filling the air. Her eyes scanned the numbers that appeared on her screen. Her face remained calm, unreadable. "I see you're retired from Ford Motor Company. 40 years of service, that's impressive. And your pension plus Social Security provides steady income." She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "However, given your age and income level, there are some limitations we need to discuss." My chest tightened. What kind of limitations? "The maximum we can approve is $35,000, and the interest rate would be 18% annually due to your age and fixed income situation." She turned her monitor toward me. Rows of numbers blurred together. My head spun. "Are you certain about this commitment, Mr. Gomez?" She asked gently. 18%. I tried to do the math in my head, but the numbers slipped away from me. Sandra helped. The total repayment would be about $52,000 over 5 years. Your monthly payment would be approximately $870. $870. More than half my pension gone every month. But I thought about Letitia, about the way she had looked at me. Disappointed, ashamed, calling me a failure. "She's worth every penny," I said quietly. "Where do I sign?" Sandra studied me for a moment, as if she wanted to say something. But she pulled out the paperwork. For the next hour, I signed my name over and over. Credit checks, identity verifications, warnings about risks. Other customers came and went around me, cashing checks, making deposits, while I made a choice that would change the rest of my life. Sandra's tone was gentle, almost cautious, the way someone speaks to a senior citizen who might not understand the full weight of what they're doing. But she processed the loan because, at least on paper, the numbers worked. By the time I walked out of that bank, the folder under my arm was heavier than before. Heavier with debt, with risk, with sacrifice. But in my heart, I told myself it was heavier with love too. The day of the wedding came faster than I expected. One moment I was signing loan papers, and the next I was sitting in the back row of a church decorated with white roses that probably cost more than my truck. Letitia looked stunning in her gown. The kind of dress she had circled in those glossy magazines. Marcus stood tall beside her, his family dressed in suits that probably cost what I made in a month. Everything sparkled. Everything screamed success. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, I felt small again. People raised glasses of champagne poured from bottles I couldn't pronounce. The room glittered with crystal chandeliers and laughter. I kept my head down, waiting for the right moment. When it came, I stood and walked toward my daughter. I handed her an envelope, my hand shaking but my heart steady. "This is for you," I whispered. "For your new life." She took it without looking, raising her glass. "I've always dreamed of having a different father," she announced with a smile that cut me deeper than any knife. Then she turned, hugged her father-in-law, and the guests cheered as if it were some kind of joke. I couldn't breathe. I left quietly, before anyone noticed. Hours later, I heard what happened. Letitia finally opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $47,000. Every bit of the loan I had taken, plus my original savings. Enough to cover the flowers, the venue, the dress, and more. Enough to prove that I had not been a failure after all. But with the check was also a letter. In shaky handwriting I had explained everything. The plant closing. The years of saving. The sacrifices after Elena died. The loan I had taken out at 18% interest. I wrote that I wanted her to have her dream wedding, even if it meant I would spend the rest of my life in debt. And then I wrote the truth I had never spoken aloud. "I don't have much left, sweetheart. But everything I do have I give to you. Because you're my greatest success." The wedding hall, full of glitter and laughter, fell silent as she read those words. Guests who had been gossiping about dresses and champagne now stared at her with wide eyes. The room that had sparkled minutes before now felt heavy, like a storm cloud had settled over it. Because in that moment everyone knew the truth. The price of her dream wedding was her father's entire life. And that was when the nightmare began. The Townsend Hotel Grand Ballroom. That was the venue Letitia had settled on. "Dennis booked it for the whole weekend," she said with a sparkle in her voice. "And this photographer. She shot the governor's daughter's wedding last year." I tightened my grip on the envelope in my hands, pulling it a little closer to my chest. For a brief moment I had thought it meant something. $47,000, scraped together with sacrifice and debt. But in this world, her world, it was just a number. Nothing impressive. Just a drop in an ocean. "The flowers alone will be $12,000, she went on, flipping through glossy pages as though she were reading off a grocery list. "Dennis said cost shouldn't matter when it comes to making me happy. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful." Yes, it was wonderful for her. Someone understood her worth. Someone who wasn't me. I nodded stiffly. "Wonderful." She looked up at me then, her brow creased slightly. "Dad, are you okay? You look pale." "Just tired," I lied, sliding the envelope back into my jacket pocket. "I should probably go. Return this to the bank." "That's a good idea," she said quickly, her voice already distracted. "No point in paying interest on money you don't even need." Her hands were already back on her magazines, her eyes shining with excitement as she circled dresses and venues funded by someone else's love. "Thanks for thinking of me, though," she called out as I reached for the door. "It's sweet that you tried." Sweet. Like a child's clumsy attempt at helping the grown-ups with real work. I walked down the pristine hallway, each footstep echoing, and out to my truck. For 10 minutes I sat there without turning the key, staring at her immaculate house through the windshield. The windows reflected only my own tired, confused face. 3 miles down the road, I had to pull over. My hands were shaking too badly to steer. The envelope in my jacket burned against my chest, as if mocking me. 40 years. 40 years of work, sacrifice, late nights, and double shifts. Everything I had ever done, I had done for her. And to her, I was just a backup plan. A safety net. A man easily replaced by someone with deeper pockets. I parked in the lot of a closed-down auto parts store. The cracked asphalt and broken windows matched how I felt. Forgotten, discarded, a relic from a time no one cared about anymore. I shut off the engine and sat in silence. "Elena," I whispered, staring at nothing. "What would you say about our girl now? Would you still call her our girl if you saw how easily she dismissed 40 years of love?" The drive home dragged on. The city passed by my windows. Empty factories where men like me used to punch the clock, boarded-up houses where families once gathered for Sunday dinners. Detroit had left its people behind, the same way my daughter had left me behind. But first I had one last piece of business. Sandra looked surprised when I walked back into Chase Bank, half an hour before closing. "Mr. Gomez," she said carefully, "is everything all right?" "I need to cancel the loan," I told her. My voice was steady, even though my heart still trembled. "Whatever it costs. Early repayment penalty. I'll pay it." Her professional smile faltered into something like concern. "Are you sure? We only processed this earlier today. The penalty will be $500. "I'll pay it," I said firmly. "I don't need this loan." The paperwork took 15 minutes. Sandra kept glancing at me, as if she wanted to ask questions, but she didn't. She was a banker. She knew when to let silence do the work. At last, she slid a receipt across her desk. "Your checking account will be debited for the penalty tomorrow." I nodded. $500 gone for the privilege of humiliating myself. Money well spent. When I got home, the silence felt different. Not heavy anymore. Not suffocating. Clean. I made a cup of Elena's favorite tea and sat in her reading chair by the window. The photos on the mantelpiece stared back at me, but now I saw them with new eyes. There was Letitia's high school graduation. In the picture, she had her arms wrapped around me, her face buried in my shoulder. I could almost hear her whisper again, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I couldn't have done this without you." For the first time in years, I believed her. College graduation. I could still hear her voice that day. "You made this possible, Dad. I'll never forget what you sacrificed for me." When had gratitude hardened into entitlement? When had my love become something she managed, like an allowance, rather than something she treasured? Maybe it was time I stopped begging for crumbs of appreciation from my own daughter. The wedding invitation sat on the kitchen table. Elegant cream cardstock. Gold lettering. "The honor of your presence is requested." Honor. An interesting word choice. I picked up the phone, ready to call Letitia. My hand hovered over the buttons. Then I set it down again. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Tonight I needed to think, not about what kind of father I had been, but what kind of father I still wanted to be for whatever relationship we had left. The tea was Elena's blend. Chamomile and mint. She always said it helped her think clearly. I sipped it slowly, watching the evening light fade through windows that needed cleaning, in a house that needed repairs I hadn't been able to afford since draining my savings. But somehow, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning came with unusual clarity. Instead of calling Letitia first thing like I usually did, I made coffee. I read the newspaper, cover to cover. The silence felt steady, not punishing. When my phone rang at 8:30, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through sharp and hurried. "Dad, call me back. We need to discuss your outfit for the engagement party." Engagement party. First I'd heard of it. I called her back 3 hours later. "Where have you been?" "I've been trying to reach you," she said. "Reading," I answered simply. "What's this about an engagement party?" "Saturday night. At Dennis's club. Nothing too formal." Then her tone shifted into that careful register I had started to recognize. "Actually, maybe it's better if you sit this one out. Dennis's friends will be there and, you understand, right? They're used to a certain level. Level. Like I was just another step on the staircase she was climbing past. "What level is that, Tia?" I asked quietly. "Well, you know. Professional people. Business owners. They might not relate to." She trailed off, letting me fill in the blanks about my inadequacy as a retired factory worker. "Don't be like that," she added quickly. "It's just easier this way." Easier. That word again. Everything about our relationship had become about what was easier for her. 3 weeks into April, the pattern was undeniable. Wedding planning meetings I wasn't invited to. Vendor consultations scheduled during hours when she knew I was unavailable. A growing list of events where my presence would be awkward for the people who mattered more. By early May, our conversations had become a script. She called with demands disguised as requests. I offered help, never polished enough, never sophisticated enough, and she found polite ways to exclude me. The dress-fitting invitation came with conditions. "You can come, but please don't talk too much. And wear something nice. Actually, do you even have anything appropriate?" I wore my best shirt and tie, the same ones I'd saved for Elena's funeral, to the bridal salon in downtown Birmingham. The place looked more like a jewelry store than a shop. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, gowns displayed on pedestals as if they were priceless relics. Letitia's friends were already there, 3 young women in designer clothes, sipping lattes and comparing engagement rings as they casually mentioned photographers whose fees were larger than my yearly income. And I stood there, a man in his best clothes, invisible in a room where money was the only language spoken. The distinguished gentleman with gray hair. Dennis. Through the doors, the congregation rose as the priest declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Applause thundered. Cheers echoed against the vaulted ceilings of St. Paul's. I stood outside, my hand still gripping the cold brass handle, frozen in place while my daughter's new life was sealed without me. My invitation slipped from my fingers, drifting to the stone steps like a discarded leaflet. 40 years of fatherhood reduced to a printing error that wasn't an error at all. Not a mistake. A decision. The bells began to ring, joyful peals that cut through me like blades. Guests poured out the doors moments later, laughing, tossing rice, snapping photos. A photographer darted through the crowd, capturing joy I wasn't meant to be part of. Someone jostled my shoulder. "Sorry, sir," a young man muttered, rushing past to catch the perfect shot of Letitia and Dennis walking hand in hand down the church steps. My daughter's smile was radiant, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me since she was a little girl in a graduation cap. The train of her dress brushed over the invitation I had dropped, smearing gold ink against the pavement as she passed. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. I pressed a hand to my jacket pocket. The envelope was still there, heavy against my chest. The letter I'd written, the truth I had promised Elena I would someday deliver. As the crowd surged toward the waiting limousines, laughter and champagne corks filling the air, I turned away. Not toward the reception, not toward the life she had chosen that no longer included me, but toward my truck parked at the far edge of the lot. The May sun was warm on my shoulders. The world moved on, cars honking, people celebrating. But in my pocket was the one thing she couldn't erase with wealth or indifference: the truth. And today, maybe that truth mattered more than walking her down any aisle ever could. The bells pealed louder now, announcing to Detroit that a bride and groom had become man and wife. Guests spilled out, their laughter rising into the bright May sky. Cameras flashed. Rice flew like confetti in sunlight. And there she was. Letitia's smile blazed like a jewel. Her arm looped through Marcus's, her veil trailing behind her in a perfect sweep of lace and silk. Dennis stayed close, his hand resting lightly at her back, the silent signal of the man who had escorted her down the aisle, the man she had chosen to display to the world as father. I stayed on the bench, unseen in the shadows beneath a maple tree, clutching the envelope. Inside were 4 pages that weighed more than $47,000 ever could. Truth, folded neatly, waiting for its moment. Guests cheered, waving programs and cell phones. The limousine pulled up, its polished doors reflecting nothing of me, only of them, her new husband, and the man who had replaced me. I rose slowly. My knees ached from the bench, from the years. But there was strength in my legs still. The kind forged on assembly lines, in long shifts and longer nights raising a daughter who had never known she wasn't mine by blood. The crowd followed the couple toward the reception hall across the street, a procession of money and influence, silk ties and manicured smiles. I slipped into their wake, one more shadow among 100 well-dressed strangers. The grand ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and crystal. Champagne flowed, laughter echoed, violins played as if life were nothing but celebration. I moved quietly through it all, the envelope firm in my grip, my gaze fixed on my daughter. Letitia laughed at something Dennis whispered. She turned, radiant, and for a moment her eyes found me. Surprise flickered there. And then something else. Guilt. Discomfort. She turned back too quickly, her smile snapping back into place for the cameras. I did not approach immediately. Timing mattered. Elena's voice in my mind again. Stand tall, Dway. You're as good as anyone. The gift table overflowed with boxes wrapped in silver and gold paper, cards in thick ivory envelopes with embossed initials. I set mine down among them, ordinary on the outside, but heavier than anything else there. Not money, Tia. Not status. Truth. As the band struck its first notes and the couple prepared for their grand entrance, I slipped away from the crowd, out into the cool evening air. The decision was made. The truth was hers now. What she did with it, whether to treasure it, deny it, or hate me for it, was no longer my burden. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. Letitia slipped the envelope into the stack on the gift table without opening it, already turning back to her guests with her bright, flawless smile. But I didn't move away. Tia, I said, my voice steady. Please, open it now. Her smile faltered. Around us, laughter and conversation carried on, but a few nearby guests glanced over, sensing the shift. Dad, she whispered, her eyes narrowing. You don't have to. Open it. My words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that stilled her. For a moment she hesitated, then slid a manicured finger under the flap and drew out the folded sheets of paper. Not cash. Not a check. Words. Handwritten in careful, deliberate cursive. Her eyes darted over the first line. My dear Tia, there are things you must know before you begin your new life. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked up at me, then back at the page, her lips moving silently as she read. Dennis leaned forward, concern tightening his expression. Is everything all right? Letitia's hands trembled. What is this? She whispered, her voice breaking. I met her gaze evenly, no anger left in me, only truth. It's the story of who you are, and what you've chosen to throw away today. The murmur of the crowd swelled as guests noticed the bride frozen in the receiving line, her father standing before her with an expression that wasn't pride, wasn't shame, just finality. Marcus touched her arm gently. Tia, what's going on? She kept reading, eyes wide now, scanning the words that explained everything. The 16-year-old girl who couldn't raise a child, Elena's joy at finally becoming a mother, the truth buried under years of sacrifice and silence. Gasps began to ripple through the line as the letter slipped from her trembling hands, pages scattering across the polished floor. Guests bent to pick them up, reading fragments aloud in shocked voices before she could stop them. Unable to have children. A miracle we never expected. Not by blood, but always by love. The reception line dissolved into chaos. Letitia's perfect wedding day, her perfect image, her perfect plan, all unraveling under the weight of 4 simple sheets of paper. I stepped back, my part complete, the storm no longer mine to carry. Dennis stepped forward, smiling broadly, his arms open as if he belonged there. Finally, we meet properly, he said. Letitia has told me so much about you. I turned slowly to face the man who had taken my place, holding out my hand calmly. I'm sure she has, I replied. Dennis grasped my hand warmly for a moment, then let go, moving back to place his arms around Letitia's shoulders. He held her with the easy confidence of a man who thought the world had handed him everything, acting as if he were the father she had always needed. You deserve the very best, he said to her. Nothing is too good for my new daughter. The words hit me like ice. The very best, he said. Apparently, the very best didn't include me, the man who had raised her, sacrificed for her, and been there for every moment of her life. Dad, let me introduce you to some friends, Letitia said quickly, already turning away from me as if I were an afterthought. She handed my envelope to Marcus without another word. Put this with the other gifts, honey, she said casually. I watched as Marcus placed it on the table among a pile of wrapped presents. There it would sit, unopened, surrounded by ribbons and boxes, carrying the truth she had never known and the story she would one day have to read to understand what she had lost. A guest smiled at me politely. Such a beautiful ceremony. You must be so proud, she said. I nodded, my eyes following Letitia as she moved through the crowd, greeting her guests with practiced elegance, accepting congratulations, and enjoying the admiration that filled the room. I allowed myself a small, calm smile and replied, Yes, I'm very proud. Inside, I was thinking about the envelope on the table, patient and waiting, carrying the words that would finally show her the difference between a father who gave his life for her and a stranger who could write a check. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and moved to stand quietly among the guests, blending in but watching carefully. Letitia was completely absorbed in her role as the bride. She moved from guest to guest, laughing, shaking hands, and smiling, her gown catching the light like silk, her hair perfect, her presence commanding the room. Around me, everyone seemed delighted, caught up in her joy. And yet, the envelope waited on the table, silent, ready to tell the truth. The moment came when Letitia raised her champagne glass. Guests turned their attention toward her. She spoke clearly, confidently, as if she were practicing for a speech she had memorized. I want to thank everyone who helped make this day possible, she said, her voice carrying across the hall. The photographers readied their cameras, capturing every angle of her radiant smile. Especially Dennis, she continued, her eyes finding him in the crowd. Then her words struck the room like a hammer. You've shown me what it means to have a father who truly cares. I've always dreamed of having a different father, and now that dream has come true." The room fell completely silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused in midair. People stared around, uncertain where to look. Some guests avoided my gaze entirely. Others examined the floral arrangements as if suddenly noticing them for the first time. The photographers clicked their cameras, capturing the stunned expressions of everyone present. Letitia turned to Dennis and smiled, walking toward him with her arms outstretched. "Dennis, thank you for showing me what real generosity looks like," she said. Dennis embraced her, clearly proud, accepting the role she had thrust upon him. And I stood there, the true father, invisible in plain sight, realizing that everything I had done, every sacrifice I had made, had been replaced with someone else's money, influence, and timing. My envelope, carrying the truth, remained on the table, waiting to tell the story she had never heard, waiting for her to understand who she had lost in the pursuit of perfection. Dennis stood there, smiling proudly, holding my daughter as if she were his own. He looked completely comfortable, as though he had stepped into a role that wasn't mine, a role I had spent 35 years fulfilling. "Letitia," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "you're the daughter I never had." The room went quiet. Some guests tried to clap politely, but the applause faded almost immediately as they realized the cruelty of what had just been said. Others whispered behind their hands, their expressions showing the awkward embarrassment of watching someone publicly dismiss the man who had raised his daughter for decades. I stood still, holding my champagne glass, and watched Letitia embrace her replacement father. She had dismissed 35 years of love as if it were nothing. I felt no anger, no bitterness, only a calm understanding. This was who she had always been, and now I finally stopped pretending otherwise. The envelope I had left, containing the adoption papers, sat quietly on the gift table, buried among expensive presents from Dennis's wealthy friends. Soon, she would discover its meaning and realize what her cruel words had cost her. I set my glass down and walked toward the exit. No shouting. No dramatic confrontation. Just a man removing himself from a place where he was clearly no longer wanted. Behind me, the reception gradually returned to celebration. Guests pretended nothing had happened. The photographer continued taking pictures, though several guests whispered that he should delete the sequence of Letitia's toast. I moved through the heavy doors into the parking garage. The envelope sat silently among the gifts, waiting to teach Letitia the difference between wanting a different father and realizing she never had the one she thought she did. My truck started immediately, just as reliable as it had always been, and I drove home through Detroit traffic, feeling an unusual peace. The neighborhoods rolled past my windows, familiar and comforting. 35 years of fatherhood were ending not with anger or tears, but with quiet satisfaction. At home, I moved through the rooms with purpose. I packed what mattered for the life ahead. Elalina's wedding ring went into my shirt pocket. The photograph from Letitia's college graduation, when gratitude had still shone in her eyes, was carefully placed in my travel bag. My work tools, earned with decades of honest labor, were packed too, deserving better than to sit forgotten while I begged for scraps of appreciation. The phone rang at 4:30. "Dad, we're opening gifts now," Letitia's bubbly voice said. "Some of these presents are amazing. Marcus's aunt gave us crystal from Ireland." I let the call go to voicemail, continuing to pack methodically. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. "Dad, are you there? We found your envelope. Why does this gift need to be opened privately?" The third call came while I folded my best shirt, the one I had intended to wear walking her down the aisle. Her voice had changed now, uncertainty creeping through the celebration. "Dad, I read your letter. This isn't funny. Call me back immediately." By the fourth call, panic had replaced confusion. Dad, this can't be true. You're lying. Call me right now. I unplugged the phone and continued sorting through 35 years of memories, keeping only what truly mattered for the future. The house already felt different, lighter somehow, as if removing the weight of obligation had made the walls themselves stand taller. My phone buzzed constantly against the kitchen counter. 20 missed calls. 30. 44. I sat down and listened to the voicemails, one after another, each one carrying Letitia's voice cracking as she struggled to process a truth she had never suspected. Adopted at 3 years old after her biological parents had died in a car accident. Raised by strangers who had chosen to love her, who had given everything they had to protect her, guide her, and keep her safe. 35 years of lies, not lies meant to hurt, but the kind of protective love that shields children from harsh realities until they're old enough to understand. Dad, you're not my real father. Her voice trembled. Then who am I? Where do I come from? Even in that moment of crisis, she struggled to recognize the difference between biology and choice, between what nature gives and what love creates. The man who raised her, the one who changed her diapers, wiped her tears, worked double shifts to pay for her college, was the father who had chosen her every day. Dad, please. I didn't mean what I said at the reception. Come back. But she had meant it. That was the problem. She had chosen money over loyalty, status over sacrifice. And now she would have to live with the consequences of that choice. I loaded my truck as the sunset painted the sky in Elena's favorite colors, orange and pink. 51 missed calls blinked on my screen as I finally backed out of the driveway, taking one last look at the modest house where we had raised someone else's daughter as our own. The adoption papers in the envelope told the whole story. The names of her birth parents, the accident that took them from this world too soon, the joy and nervous hope that Elena and I felt when social services called to tell us a little girl needed a home. 75 stretched ahead like a ribbon of possibilities. Detroit's skyline shrank in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. Sinatra's voice filled the truck, soothing me, as the evening light painted the Michigan farmland in shades of gold and quiet peace. 53 missed calls now. I turned the phone off completely. I looked at Elena's photo on the dashboard and spoke to her silently. I finally did what needed doing. 35 years I gave love to an ungrateful child. Time to live for myself. The truck hummed steadily at 65 miles per hour, carrying me toward whatever came next. Cincinnati, maybe. Louisville. Somewhere warm where winter wouldn't ache in these old bones, where no one knew my story or demanded that I justify my choices. Small towns rolled past my windows, places where honest work and simple decency mattered, where a 68-year-old retired mechanic could start over without apology, without needing anyone else's approval. My thermos held Elena's favorite coffee blend. Bitter, but warming. The road atlas lay open on the passenger seat, marked with circles in red ink, potential destinations for a new life. Planning felt good after years of simply reacting to Letitia's demands and disappointments. Letitia, I said aloud to the darkening highway, my eyes on the road ahead. You wanted a different father. Now you have one. I hope Dennis is everything you dreamed he would be. She would have to reckon with the truth. The adoption revelation would shatter her perfect wedding story. No more boasting about her generous new father figure. No more casual cruelty toward the man who had sacrificed everything for her. Instead, she would face questions that money could never answer. Questions of identity, belonging, and love. And for the first time in decades, I felt free. Who was she really? Where had she come from? And what had she truly lost by choosing wealth and luxury over love and loyalty? Dennis Hargrave could buy her the grandest weddings, the most expensive designer gowns, the kind of things people admired from afar. But no amount of money could replace 35 years of devotion, of sleepless nights, scraped-together paychecks, homework help, bedtime stories, or the quiet pride of watching her graduate from school and college. Those were moments built on choice, not obligation. Foundations of unconditional love that Dennis could never offer. The highway signs ticked by as miles fell behind me. Toledo, Dayton, small towns where I could simply be Dewey Gomez, not the disappointed father of an ungrateful daughter. My truck's headlights cut through the gathering darkness as I drove toward whatever awaited me. Behind me, Detroit held nothing I needed anymore. Ahead lay freedom, peace, and a life I had long forgotten could exist. The phone stayed silent in my pocket. 53 missed calls, each one fading into the past with every mile I put between myself and the city. Letitia had made her choice long before today. The adoption letter in my gift envelope merely showed her the true cost of that choice. The man she had ignored, the father who had raised her with every ounce of love he had to give when she had no one else. I was 68 years old. Perhaps 20 more good years, perhaps more. But they were mine now. Mine to live without begging for approval or gratitude. Mine to spend building a life I had chosen, rather than one dictated by others' expectations. The radio played late-night classics, a soundtrack for this new beginning. Elena's photo caught the dashboard light, glowing like a quiet blessing. Behind me lay 3 decades of sacrifice, worry, and love given without guarantee. Ahead stretched possibility, peace, and freedom. Finally, I was free.